Hey again! Today we'll continue reading The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin, starting with Chapter 8. Before we begin, I just want to do a quick recap of the events that happened the last time we read. Old Man Westing was found dead in his estate, and all of the tenants of Sunset Towers were then invited to the reading of his will, which was a surprise to all of them because none of them knew they were connected to Mr. Westing in any way. And in his will, Sam Westing said that one of them is the murderer, and in order to receive the inheritance, they have to solve the mystery of who killed him. So he paired each of them up and gave each pair $10,000 and a set of clues, and then told them to begin. And so that is where Chapter 8 will pick up. Chapter 8, The Paired Heirs. During the night, Flora Baumbach's itsy-bitsy snow flings breached into a blizzard. The tenants of Sunset Towers awoke from a clue-chasing, blood-dripping dream, bound in twisted sheets and imprisoned by 15-foot snowdrifts. No telephones, no electricity. Snowbound with a murderer. The slow procession looked like some ancient, mysterious rite as partner sought out partner on the windowless stairs, and silent pairs threaded through the corridors in the flickering light of crooked, colored striped candles, the product of Turtle's stint at summer camp. These handmade candles are both practical and romantic, she said, peddling her wares from apartment door to frighten tenants at 7 in the morning. Oh, it's only Turtle. And the colored stripes tell time, which is very handy if your electric clock stopped. Each stripe burns exactly 1/2 hour, more or less. 12 stripes, 6 hours. How much? Not wishing to take advantage of this emergency, I've reduced the price to only $5 each. Outrageous. Even more so when the electricity came on 2 hours after her last sale. Sorry, no refunds, Turtle said. No matter. What was $5 to heirs of an estate worth $200 million? Clues. They had to work on those clues. Behind closed doors. Whisper. Someone may be listening. Not all the heirs were huddled in plotting, puzzle-solving pairs. Jake Wexler had retreated to his office after a long and loud argument with his wife. He sure could have used half of that $10,000, but he wouldn't admit it, not to her. The forfeited money upset her more than the murder of her uncle, if he was her uncle. 5 floors above, Jake's partner stood before the restaurant's front window, staring at the froth on the angry lake and beyond. No one had bothered to tell Madame Who about the Westing game. Other players were snowbound elsewhere. Denton Deere in the hospital, Sandy at home. No one gave a thought to where Otis Amber or Crow might be. But Sydelle Pulaski was there, thumping her crutch against the baseboards as she limped through the carpeted halls on the arm of her pretty partner. Not one, but 7 tenants had invited her to morning coffee or afternoon tea. Murder or not, they had to see Pulaski's copy of that will. 3 lumps, please. Angela drinks it black. Your health? Thank the Lord I'm still able to hobble about. Your job? I was private secretary to the president of Schultz Sausages. Poor Mr. Schultz. I don't know how he'll manage without me. Your shorthand notes? Thank you for the refreshments. I must hurry back for my medication. Come, Angela. One heir had not invited them in, but that didn't stop Sydelle Pulaski from barging into apartment 2D. Hi, Chris. Just thought we'd pop in and see how you're doing. Don't be scared. I'm not the murderer. Angela's not the murderer, and we don't think you're the murderer. Mind if I sit down? The secretary toppled into a chair next to the invalid before he could reply. Here, I stole a macaroon for you. It's so sticky you'll be tasting it all day. I must have 6 strands of coconuts between my upper molars. Chris took the cookie. Just look at that smile. It could break your heart. Angela wished her partner had not said that. It seemed so insensitive, so crude. But at least Sydelle was talking to him, which was more than she was able to do. Angela, the fortunate one, standing like a dummy. I know Denton wants to work on the clues with you. He's snowbound too. You ver pretty. How did pretty come out? He meant to say nice. Chris bent his curly head over the geography book in his lap. She wasn't laughing at him. It was all right to ask her because she was going to marry his partner. What are grans? Angela did not understand. Chris fanned the pages of the book to a picture of a wheat field. Grans. Oh, grains. You want to know the name of some grains? Let's see. There's wheat, rye, corn, barley, oats. O's! Angela thought the boy was going into a fit, but he was only repeating her last word. Oats. Sydelle was puffing her warm breath on the window and wiping a frosted area clean with her sleeve. There, now you'll be able to watch the birds again. Anything else we can do for you, young man? Chris nodded. Read me shorthand nose. The pretty lady and the funny lady quickly moved out the door. One limped, but it was a pretended limp, he could tell. Not like the limper on the Westinghouse lawn. Oats. Chris closed his eyes to picture the clues. 4, plain, grain, shed. Grain equals oats, Otis Amber. 4 plus D from shed equals Ford, but neither the delivery boy nor the judge limped, and he still hadn't figured out she or plain. He'd have to wait for Denton Deer. Denton Deer was smart. He was a doctor. Chris raised his binoculars to the cliff. Windblown drifts buttressed the house. Something moved on the second floor, a hand holding back the edge of a drape. Slowly, the heavy drape fell back against the window. The Westinghouse was snowbound too, and somebody was snowbound in it. Only one of the players thought the clues told how the $10,000 check was to be spent. Take stock in America, the will said. Go for broke, the will said. In the stock market, Turtle said, and whoever makes the most money wins it all, the whole $200 million. Their clues. C, mountain, am, O. Stood for symbols of 3 corporations listed on the stock exchange. C, MT, the abbreviation for mountain, AMO. But AM and O are separate clues, Flora Baumbach said. To confuse us. What about the murderer? I thought we were supposed to find the name of the murderer. To put us off track, Turtle said. If the police suspected murder, she'd be in jail by now. Her fingerprints were over everything in the Westinghouse, including the corpse. You don't really think one of us could have killed a living, breathing human being in cold blood, do you, Mrs. Baumbach? Do you? Turtle did, but the dressmaker was a cream puff. Don't you look at me like that, Turtle Wexler. You know very well I could never think such a thing. I must have misunderstood. Oh my, I just wish Miss Pulowski had shown us her copy of the will. Turtle returned to her calculations, multiplying numbers of shares times price, adding a broker's commission, trying to total the sums to the $10,000 they had to spend. Flora Baumbach may have been wrong about the murder, but she was not convinced of Turtle's plan. What about buy Westing paper products? I'm sure that was in the will. Great, Turtle exclaimed. We'll do just that. We'll add WPP to the list of socks we're going to buy. Flora Baumbach had watched enough television commercials to know that buy Westing paper products meant that as soon as she could get to market, she'd buy all the Westing products on the shelf. Still, it felt good having a child around again. She'd play along gladly. You know, Turtle, you may be right about putting our money in the stock market. I remember the will said, May God thy gold refine. That must be from the Bible. Shakespeare, Turtle replied. All quotations were either from the Bible or Shakespeare. Mr. Hu moved aside a full ashtray with a show of distaste and rearranged the clues. Purple fruited makes more sense, he said. Grace Wexler looked across the restaurant to the lone figure at the window. Are you sure your wife doesn't understand English? I mean, after living here for so long? That's my second wife, he said. She came over from Hong Kong 2 years ago. She does look young, but it's so hard to tell ages of people of the Oriental persuasion, Grace said. Why was he glaring at her like that? Your wife is quite lovely, you know, so doll-like and inscrutable. Hu bit off half a chocolate bar. He had enough problems with the empty restaurant, a lazy son, and his nagging ulcer. Now he had to put up with this bigot. Grace lit another cigarette and rearranged the clues to read Purple Waves. You heard that doorman say purple waves. It must mean something. And that ghastly secretary was wearing a dress with purple waves last night, not to mention her crutch. You should not speak unkindly of those less fortunate than you, Hu said. You're quite right, Grace replied. I thought the poor thing handled her infirmity with great courage. Traveling mimosa, my future son-in-law says. He's a doctor, you know. Anyhow, Pulaski couldn't possibly be the murderer, not the way she gimps around. Besides, how could my Uncle Sam know she'd wear purple waves to his funeral? Hu waved the cigarette smoke from his face. The murderer had to have a motive. How about this? A niece murders her rich uncle to inherit his money. Good sport that she was, Grace tossed back her head and uttered an amused ha ha ha. Not that I care, Who said. That cheating moneybag's got what he deserved. What's the matter? Look! Grace pointed to the clues. Fruited, purple, waves, 4C. 4C! The murderer lives in apartment 4C. I live in 4C, Who barked. If Sam Westing wanted to say 4C, he would have written the number 4, letter C. SEA means sea, like what a turtle swims in. Come now, Mr. Who, we are both being silly. Have you spoken to your son about his clues? Some son. If you can catch him, you can ask him. Who stuffed the rest of the candy bar into his mouth. And some business I've got here. Everybody orders up. Nobody orders down. That coffee shop is sending me to the poorhouse. And your Angela and that Pulowski woman, they didn't show us the will, and they didn't give us their clues. They didn't pay for 3 cups of jasmine tea and 6 almond cookies, and you smoke too much. And you eat too much. Grace threw her coin purse on the table and stormed out of the restaurant. Change, that's all he'll get from her. He'd have to beg on his knees before she signed Grace Windsor Wexler on the $10,000 check, that madman. Some pair they made. Attila the Hun and Gracie the Useless. Gracie Windclopple Wexler, heir pretender, pretentious heir. First, the money. They signed their names onto the check. Half would go into Doug Who's savings account, half would go into Theo's parents'. Next, the clues. His, N, on, to, the, 4. Maybe they're numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, Theo guessed. I still say on is no, the bored track star said. He clasped his hands behind his head, leaned back into the coffee shop booth, and stretched his long legs under the opposite bench. And no is what we got. No real clues, no leads, no will. After 3 cups of coffee, 2 pastries, and a bowl of rice pudding with cream, Sydelle Pulowski had offered nothing in return. Theo refused to give up. Are you sure you didn't see anything unusual at the Westing house that night? I didn't kill Westing, if that's what you mean, and the only unusual thing I saw was Turtle Wexler. I think the pest is madly in love with me. How's that for luck? Get serious, Doug. One of the heirs is a murderer. We could all get killed. Just because somebody zapped the old man doesn't mean he's going to kill again. Dad says... Doug paused. His father's comment about awarding a medal to the murderer might be incriminating. Theo tried another tack. I was playing chess with somebody in the game room last night. Who? That's what's strange. I don't know who. We'll have to find out which one of the heirs plays chess. Since when is chess playing evidence for murder? Well, it's something to go on, Theo replied. And another thing. The will said no 2 sets of clues are alike. Maybe all the clues put together make one message, a message that points to the murderer. Somehow or other we'll have to get the heirs to pool the clues. Oh, sure. The killer can't wait to hand over the clues that will hang him. Doug rose. Snowbound or not, he had to stay in shape for the track meet. For the rest of the day, he jogged through hallways and up and down stairs, scaring the nervous tenants half out of their wits. Judge J.J. Ford had no doubt that the clues she shared with the doorman were meant for her, but Sam Westing could toss off sharper insults than skies, am, shining, brother. His choice of words must have been limited, therefore these clues were part of a longer statement. A statement that named a name. The name of the murderer. No, Westing could not have been murdered. If his life had been threatened, if he had been in danger of any kind, he would have insisted on police protection. He owned the police. He owned the whole town. Sam Westing was not the type to let himself get killed, not unless he was insane. The judge opened the envelope given her by the incompetent Plum. A certificate of sanity, dated last week. Having thoroughly examined, keen mind and memory, excellent physical condition, signed, Sidney Sykes, M.D. Sykes. That sounded familiar. The judge scanned the obituary she had cut from Saturday's newspaper. Samuel Westing and his friend, Dr. Sidney Sykes, were involved in a near-fatal automobile accident. Both men were hospitalized with severe injuries. Sykes resumed his Westington medical practice in the post of county coroner, but Westing disappeared from sight. Sykes was Westing's friend, and, she remembered, a witness to the will, but he was also a physician in good standing. She would accept his opinion on Westing's sanity, for the time being at least. Back to the clues. Look at her, the big-time judge, fussing over scraps of Westing super-strength paper towels. Forget the clues, she said out loud, rising from her desk to putter about the room. Nibbling on a macaroon, she stacked the used coffee cups on a tray. If only that Pulaski person had let her study the will. That's where the real clues were buried, among the veiled threats and pompous promises, the slogans and silliness in that hodgepodge of a will. In his will, Sam Westing implied, he did not state, he implied, that 1. He was murdered, 2. The murderer was one of the heirs, 3. He alone knew the name of the murderer, and 4. The name of the murderer was the answer to the game. The game, a tricky, divisive Westing game. No matter how much fear and suspicion he instilled in the players, Sam Westing knew that greed would keep them playing the game, until the murderer was captured and punished. Sam Westing was not murdered, but one of his heirs was guilty. Guilty of some offense against a relentless man. And that heir was in danger. From his grave, Westing would stalk his enemy, and through his heirs he would wreak his revenge. Which one? Which heir was the target of Westing's vindictiveness? In the name of justice, she would have to find Westing's victim before the others did. She would have to learn everything she could about each one of the heirs. Who are they, and how did their lives touch Westing's, these 16 strangers whose only connection with one another was Sunset Towers? Sunset Towers. She'd start from there. Good, the telephones are working again. The number she dialed was answered on the first ring. Hi there, this is a recording of yours truly, Barney Northrup. I'm at your service. Soon as I get back in my office, that is. Just sing out your problem to old Barney here when you hear the beep. Beep. J.J. Ford hung up without signing out her problem to old Barney. He, too, could be involved in Westing's plot. The newspaper. She would try the newspaper. Surely someone was snowbound there. After 8 rings, a live voice answered. We usually don't supply that kind of information over the phone, but since it's you, Judge Ford, I'll be happy to oblige. Just spell out the names and I'll call back if I find anything. Thank you, I'd appreciate that. It was a beginning. Sam Westing was dead, but maybe, just once, she could beat him at his own game. His last game. Having found what she wanted in Turtle's desk, Angela returned to her frilly bedroom where Sydelle Pulaski, glasses low on her nose, was perched on a ruffled stool at the vanity table, smearing blue eyeshadow on her eyelids. First we tackle our own clues, the secretary said, frowning at the result in the threefold mirror. Unlucky from the day she was born, she now had a beautiful and well-loved partner. There was always the chance that they alone had been given the answer. She unsealed the envelope and held it out to Angela. Take one. Angela removed the first clue. Good. Now it was Sydelle's turn. Glory be, she exclaimed, thinking she had the name of the murderer. Her thumb was covering the letter D. The word was hood. Angela's turn. The third clue was from. Sydelle's turn. The fourth clue was spacious. The fifth and last clue was. Angela uttered a low moan. Her hand shook as she passed the paper to her partner. The fifth and last clue was Grace. Grace, that's your mother's name, isn't it? Sydelle said. Well, don't worry. That clue doesn't mean your mother is the murderer. The will says it's not what you have, it's what you don't have that counts. The secretary had not yet transcribed the shorthand, but she had read through it several times before hiding the notebook in a safe place. By the way, are you really related to Mr. Westing? Angela shrugged. Sydelle assumed that meant no and turned to the clues. Good, Grace, from, hood, spacious. The only thing I can figure out from these clues is, good gracious, from hood space. As soon as the parking lot is shoveled out, we'll peek under the hoods of all the cars. A map or more clues may be hidden there. Maybe even the murder weapon. Now let's hear about the other clues. Angela reported on the clues gathered in the game room and during the day's coming and going. King, Queen, Otis Amber said. King Otis and Queen Crow. Purple waves. Mother switched 2 clues around when Sandy mentioned those words. On or no. Doug and Theo could not decide whether that clue was right side up or upside down. Grains. Chris Theodorakis thinks that clue refers to Otis Amber. You know, grains, oats. MT. Angela showed her partner the crumpled scrap of paper she picked up along with Sydelle's dropped crutch during Flora Baumbach's tea party. 500 shares MT at $6 equals $3,000. Broker's commission plus 90 equals $3,090. I checked Turtle's diary. She's not following any stock with a symbol like MT, so it must be one of her clues. MT could stand for either mountain or empty. Sorry. Excellent, Sydelle Pulowski remarked. Her partner was beautiful, but not dumb. Read all the clues together now. Good, hood, from, spacious, grace. King, queen, purple, waves, on or no, grains, mountain, or empty. Sydelle was disappointed. It's not what you have, it's what you don't have that counts. And what we don't have is a verb. Nothing makes sense without a verb. What about the judge? Judge Ford thought her clues were an insult, and she said something about playing a pawn in Westing's game, and she had a clipping of the obituary on her desk. This obituary. Angela handed Sydelle the newspaper taken from Turtle's drawer. What's that? It was a knock on the front door. It was footsteps in the living room. It was Theo. Anyone for a game of chess? He asked, leaning through the bedroom doorway. No, thank you, Sydelle replied, looking very busy. Theo smiled shyly at Angela and left. Sydelle read the obituary in Turtle's newspaper. The words $200 million were underlined, but she found a more interesting item. Sam Westing was a master at chess. No wonder Theo's so interested. Do you know anything about the game, Angela? A little, she replied slowly, putting the pieces in order. The judge says she's a pawn, and Otis Amber says he's the king. Crow's the queen. Oh well, it's probably just a coincidence. We can't leave any stone unturned, Sydelle insisted. As the will says, object of the game, to win. What did you say? Object of the game, to win. How about object of the game, twin? Maybe the murderer is a twin. Twin! Sydelle liked that. The only problem would be getting the murderer to admit that he or she is a twin. Let's get back to my apartment. It's time I transcribed those notes. Angela helped the invalid to her feet and nervously peered in both directions before stepping into the hallway. Sydelle chuckled at her timidity. There's nothing to be scared of, Angela. Westing was murdered for his money, and we're not rich yet. We won't be rich enough to be murdered until we find the name, and by the time we get the money from the estate, the murderer will be locked up in jail. In spite of the impeccable logic, Angela looked back over her shoulder several times on the way to 3C. Strange. Sydelle stood before her open apartment door. She had slammed it shut on leaving, but had not locked the deadbolt. After all, not even a burglar could get into a snowbound building. Unless... Angela, too frightened to notice that Sydelle ran through the apartment with her crutch in the air, found her partner in the bathroom, frantically tossing soiled towels from the hamper. Sydelle Pulowski stared at the bare wicker bottom, then sank to the rim of the bathtub, shaking her head in disbelief. Someone in Sunset Towers had stolen the shorthand notebook. Chapter 9. Lost and Found. Early the next morning, a typed index card was tacked to the elevator's back wall. Lost. Important business papers of no value to anyone but the owner. Please return to Sydelle Pulowski, 3C. No questions asked. The shorthand notebook was not returned, but the idea of a bulletin board was an instant success. By late afternoon, the elevator was papered with notices and filled with tenants facing sideways and backwards, reading as they rode up and down. Lost. Silver cross on filigree chain, topaz pin and earrings, gold-filled cufflinks. Return to Grace Winsor Wexler, 3D. Reward. All players willing to discuss their clues come to the coffee shop tomorrow, 10 a.m. Whoever stole my Mickey Mouse clock better give it back. Just leave it in the hall in front of apartment 3D when no one's looking. Turtle Wexler. Order down, not up. Or come on up to the 5th floor and dine in excellence at Shinhu's restaurant, specializing in exquisite Chinese cuisine. Lost. String of pearls. Sentimental value. If found, please bring them to apartment 2C. Thank you. Flora Bombach, dressmaking and alterations, reasonably priced. Found. 6 clues. The following 6 clues, printed on squares of Westing toilet tissue, were found in the 3rd floor hallway. Braided, kicking tortoise, C. a brat. I'm having an informal party this evening from 8 o'clock on. You are all invited. Please come. J.J. Ford, apartment 4D. Turtle, wherever you are, be home at 7:30 sharp. Your loving mother. Mom, I'm home. No one else was. On reading Mrs. Wexler's note in the elevator, Flora Bombach had insisted, "You must do what your mother says." When Turtle replied, "Like showing her our clues?" Flora Bombach's answer was, "Perhaps so. After all, she is your mother." Flora Bombach was sappy, always smiling that dumb smile, always so polite to everybody, and so timid. When they had finally reached a snowbound broker, Flora Bombach was so nervous she dropped the telephone. Turtle had to admit to some nervousness herself, but it was the first real order she had ever placed. For a minute there, she thought she might choke on the thumping heart that had jumped into her throat, but she had pulled off the transaction like a pro. Now, if only the stock market would go up, she'd show Mr. Westing about refining gold. The next part of the will would read, "Whichsoever pair made the most money with the $10,000 inherits the whole estate." She was sure of it. "Oh, there you are." Grace Wexler acted as if Turtle was the tardy one, but she quickly sweetened. "Come, dear, let's go to your room and I'll fix your hair." Her mother sat behind her on the edge of the narrow bed, loosened the dark brown hair, and brushed it to a gloss. She had not done that with such care in a long, long time. "Have you eaten?" "Mrs. Bombach made me dinner." Turtle felt the fingers dividing the hair into strands. Her mother was so warm, so close. "Your poor father's probably starving. He's been so busy on the phone, changing appointments and all." "Daddy's eating in the coffee shop. I just saw him there." Turtle had dashed in, shouting, "The braided tortoise strikes again!" and kicked a surprised Theo in the shin. It was Doug who, not Theo, who had made the sign. Her mother twisted the 3 strands into a braid. "I think you should wear your party dress tonight. You look so pretty in pink." Pretty? She had never used that word before. Not about her. What's going on? "You know, sweetheart, I'm rather hurt that you won't tell your own mother about your clues." So that was it. She should have known. "My lips are sealed," Turtle said defiantly. "Just one eensy-beensy clue," Grace wheedled, winding a rubber band around the end of the braid. Turtle replied through sealed lips. Angela came into the small room and tugged Turtle's braid. Only her sister could get away with that. Beaming on her favorite, Grace took her hand, then gasped. "Angela, where's your engagement ring?" "I have a rash on my finger," she said. Thump, thump. Sydelle Pulaski appeared in the doorway. "Hi, what's everybody doing in the closet?" "See, I told you this is a closet," Turtle said. Grace ignored the complaint. It did no good being nice to that ungrateful child, never satisfied, always whining about something or another. "Oh, hello, Miss Pulaski." "I've been feeling a bit weakly, thank you, but nothing can keep me from a party." Sydelle's crutch was painted in black and white squares to match her black and white checkered dress. Her large hoop earrings were also black and white. The white one dangled from her left ear, the black from her right. "The party is such a lovely idea," Grace said, warming up to the owner of the shorthand notes. "When I saw the invitation in the elevator, I suggested to Mr. Hu that he call the judge to see if she needed hors d'oeuvres, and sure enough, he got an order for 6 dozen. She turned to Angela. "Hadn't you better get dressed, dear? It's getting late. It's too bad Dr. D can't escort you to the party, but your father and I will take you." Angela and I are going together. We're partners, you know." Sydelle had it all planned. They were to appear in identical costumes. Tonight was the night they would discover if one of the heirs was a twin. "I'm going to the party with Mrs. Bombach," Turtle remarked. "The sign said everyone's invited." Again, Grace ignored her. "By the way, Miss Pulaski, I do hope you changed your mind about showing me your notes." It was the secretary's turn to seal her lips. She wouldn't put it past that uppity Grace Windsor Wexler to steal the notebook from an unfortunate cripple and then rub it in. Grace tried again, her voice dripping with honey. "You know, of course, that if I do win the inheritance, everything I own goes to Angela." Turtle bounded up. "Let me out of here. A person can't breathe in this closet." She kicked the bed, kicked the chair, kicked the desk, and elbowed past the disapproving secretary. "What in the world is wrong with that child?" her mother said. Judge Ford was instructing Theo in the art of bartending when the telephone rang. The snowbound newspaper man had found several items in the files. First, the engagement announcement of Angela Wexler to Dr. Denton Deere. Next, several clippings on a lawsuit brought against Sam Westing by an inventor named... "Hold on, please," Mr. Hu waddled in with a large tray of appetizers. The judge pointed him to the serving buffet and apologized to her caller. "I'm sorry, would you repeat that name?" "James Hu. He claimed Westing stole his idea of the disposable paper diaper. 1 minute, please. The judge cupped her hand over the mouthpiece. Please don't leave, Mr. Hu. I was hoping you'd stay for the party, as a guest, of course. Your wife and son, too. Hu grunted. He hated parties. He had seen his fill of people eating and drinking and acting like clowns, jabbering like... So that's it. Jabbering, dropping clues. I'll be right back. The receiver hissed with an impatient sigh. Then the researcher went on. I've got a thick file of sports teams on another Hu, a Doug Hu. Seems he runs a pretty fast mile for a high school kid. That's all I could find on the names you gave me, but I still have stacks of Westing clippings to go through. Thank you so much. The doorbell rang. The party was about to begin. That's the end of Chapter 9. We will pick up with Chapter 10 in the next video.